Today we have to lead our provost conversation on teaching and learning, Dr. Stephen Zeil, who's been with the associate professor with the computer science department and has been teaching in an online format apparently for 15 years, which must put you among the pioneers for teaching in an online format, so which we greatly appreciate. And Dr. Zeil, as you can see from the title, is going to be talking about using technology to support online and hybrid learning, which is something that he's done for a very long time, I understand. So we're looking forward to hearing about some of the technology tools, some of your particular way of using those tools to help with that. And of course, as this is such an important part of what ODU does, I think everybody here is going to be fascinated to hear what you have to say and to get some tips. So over to you, Dr. Zeil.
Well, thank you. And welcome to everybody who came out on a really miserable day out there. It's kind of a jawbreaker of a title when you get down to it. My first reaction on reading the suggested title was I wanted to take a magic marker and go through face-to-face and online or hybrid and say, well, what's left? You know, doesn't that just amount to teaching? But I really have been involved with various forms of online teaching for some time. I was actually just looking back through some very, very old files, and I guess it was around 1997 that the computer science department decided to go big time into trying to put much of our curriculum online, and by dint of being the person who made the most noise of, boy, this is really going to get us in trouble if we don't do a good job of it, I got made coordinator of the effort and have been serving in that capacity for a long time. Now, I've developed a number of courses of my own as well, including one that's been running continuously for 15 years, another that is, I think, passing its 12th birthday this year. And the only way I can keep my sanity in that and my sense of connection with the students is to, in fact, bounce back and forth a lot. So one course I teach, I do alternate semesters, online and live. Other courses, I coordinate with simultaneous live sections being taught along while in the same semester as the online version. And we share materials, we share a lot of organizational ideas. And that sort of colors where I'm coming from. Now, having disposed of the second half of the title, let me say I really love the first word of the title. Because what's a lever? A lever is a device that you use to get something difficult done with a lot less effort than you would normally need. And I will make this my proposition for the day, that if the technology you are working with on a day-to-day basis isn't functioning as a lever for you, you need to go find different technology. If it's not, in fact, saving you time, saving you effort, then it's taking away from what you should be doing, working with your students, working with your courses. And that's the basic idea I want to get out. Now, I have two rules in support of that I'm going to try to put forward today. And the first rule is when you agree to do an online course, you will find yourself immediately surrounded by all the local wizards who will tell you all the wonderful technology to use and make all kinds of recommendations for you. You need to pay no attention to what the wizards say, but pay lots of attention to the man behind the curtain. And that's you. Because what people focus on when we say web course, online course, we're tending to focus on that one component of a course, which is let's get the core lecture material, the core content transmitted from teacher to student. And we make these distinctions that are based upon that. Now, you all know from teaching live courses how small a percentage of your time commitment to that course is in those 3 hours standing in front of the classroom. And the same thing is true for an online course. Just because you got all that wonderful material in the can and on the web doesn't mean that you don't have a major time commitment left. So I think the real challenge in applying technology is not how to get something shiny and fancy out there on the web or up in front of the students to view, but to think about what happens after that's in the can. Where do you waste your time? Where do you spend your time the second time you offer any course? And that's where you really want to look for the levers that will help you save time, have more time left to actually interact with your students, or just be more willing to dive in because you're not tired of dealing with all the nonsense. So for me, it comes down to things like grading, communications, office hours, advising. I'm not an advisor, but like many of you, those weeks when registration is up, I'm spending an awful lot of time answering questions. Should I take your course? Do I need your course? Do I qualify to take your course? Things like that. I'm not going to say much about grading today because I don't want to get everyone mad at me. My field, my profession, we happen to be lucky because we can get a lot of grading done automatically, and that will just get people mad at me if I talk about that. But I do want to talk a bit about communications, office hours, and advising, particularly the advising side of communications as well. When you look at the ways that you can set up communications between yourself and your students, you've got so many options. When one faculty member in our department was about to do their first online course, I sat down with them and I said, look, you can do email, you can do the Blackboard discussion board, we can set up a web forum for you, you can do Blackboard instant messaging, you can do Blackboard's mail, you can do, and I said, you need to figure out how you want to conduct this communication back and forth between your students. I said, so what do you think you want to use? And he said, yes. I know. No, you don't get to choose all of it. Because what's important is that you actually stay responsive to the students. They've got to know that when they initiate a conversation with you, that you're going to get back to them quickly. And if you try to go for everything, your attention is going to be spread all over the place. So you've got lots of possibilities. And I think the key here is to play to your strengths. If you are really good at writing insightful answers to people's questions, maybe you want to be using blogs and wikis. If you are very good at encouraging students through questions to get into discussions, a discussion board is going to be perfect for you. And if you can't play to your strengths, then exploit your weaknesses. I'm obsessive about checking email. So what is my technological lever for dealing with communications? Everything has to report back to me in email. If I use a discussion board, I have to make sure that I'm using one that will email me when someone posts. If I'm using a wiki, I need to be able to know when someone has posted, and it's got to appear in that one window because I'm going to have that open all the time. That's my obsession, so let me turn it into an advantage. And then I have to manage it. Well, I think that's a two-part problem. First is, let the tech help. And email technology does offer a lot of help for you. This is a picture of my email from a few days ago, and you might notice it's quite colorful. Each of those colored bands is a different course. And my task, each time I sit down, once or twice a day at the very least, is to get all the colored bands out of there. Because that means I've dealt with the students. All the white things that's left behind, that's stuff from my department chair and from the university administration and everyone else who uses my general email account. And they can usually wait a day. But the emphasis for me is knowing what came in associated with which classes and being able to deal with that quickly. Now, this is one particular email program. Most people here use Outlook, but you can do much the same. You can set up rules that will assign tags to messages. And those tags appear as little colored rectangles in most versions of Outlook that I've seen. And so you can have a visual indicator of which of these things have come in from classes. Now, for that to work, you have to have a way to identify which email messages actually came in from students writing to you about your classes. And for that, you need a little bit more help. And this you impose. Because you tell your students, look, I've got special email addresses set up for these courses. Or make sure you put the course number in the subject line of each email message you send me. Or I don't want to get any email from you that didn't come from the Blackboard messaging system that has that nice little standard subject line that it throws into everything. Tell them that's what you expect from them. Put it in your syllabus, put it in your communications documents, all that. Will they pay attention? Well, some of them will. And for the others, During those first few weeks of class, you just make sure you have a nice little text document open at all times that you can copy and paste from. And the text document says, please remember to put this in your subject line when sending email about this class. If you had done this, you might have even gotten a quicker response. And eventually they will realize how pure, selfish self-interest that they should be making your job easier. At your end, I strongly recommend that you build a FAQ, a frequently asked questions list. Here, for example, is mine. This is for the course that's 15 years old. So yes, I have a very long frequently asked questions list with things like, my program crashed, how do I find out why? You can imagine that's a very common message for me to get as a computer science prof. And I've got a lot to say about that. And there's no way I'm typing that into every email message that I get on this particular subject. So instead, the frequently asked questions list is there, and what's important about it, most important, is the fact that I've got that collection of links that I can just pick up, paste into my email response to the students, or paste into a forum posting responding to students, so that I can point them straight at that, and I don't have to do that over and over again. So create the frequently asked questions list, but don't create it in Blackboard. You don't want it in Blackboard. Why? Because Blackboard has this problem. Unless you're very careful, you can't link directly to things in Blackboard, and so you will wind up putting links into email that don't work out of Blackboard. There's only a few sections of Blackboard that you can link directly to. And so, see, and you thought that was important. You were right. Blackboard is not the web. Blackboard is not everything online. Blackboard does some stuff very, very well. It provides some really nifty tools. It provides a reasonable testing facility, depending upon which version of Blackboard has been installed most recently. It provides an organizational structure and a common place for students to come to for that organization. Those are all good things. However, it does impose some limitations on what you can do with your materials and with your students. First thing is to recognize that when you put stuff in most of Blackboard, you're putting it behind a login wall. And you have to ask, do you want your material more accessible than that? Should students have to log in to read this? I have never, for example, understood people who put their syllabus on Blackboard behind a login wall, because students need to read that before they register for the course. And they're not going to be able to find it there. So you need to think about things that you want to provide that will be accessible, not hidden behind the wall. And so I tend to have sort of all my materials that I want public, all my lecture notes and things like that, on the web. They're accessible, and I will have one big outline page for it, which has a hidden purpose that I'll talk about in a minute. And then in Blackboard, I will have links to that material, so that the Blackboard course site becomes an organizational structure for them to actually find these things. Now, when I make it accessible like this, who am I making it accessible to? Well, clearly the students who are enrolled in the course can find it, because I've provided the links to them. But also, a lot of times when I'm answering email to students, I want to say, this was covered in that prerequisite course. You really should remember that, but if you need to review it, go here, and I want to give them a link. Now, if that prerequisite course has all of its course material on Blackboard, and you have to be enrolled in that course section to have it, I can't provide them with that kind of link. Or I mentioned devising before, all those questions, do I need to take this course? Can I take this course? What do you folks have done that, right? You get these inquiries, and what do they show you? They show you the little one-paragraph course description from whatever institution they took what they think is an equivalent course at. And you're trying to make an informed judgment on whether they will then succeed in your course or not based on that. Turn it around. Say, look, here's the outline of the course. All the topics, do they look familiar to you? sample some of the lecture notes that they link to. If all that seems familiar to you, then probably you don't need to take this course. If only some of it seems familiar to you, then yeah, you probably need to take this course. If you can't even understand the opening set of lecture notes, then we need to talk about the prerequisite courses and which of those you should be taking. But all that requires being able to show this material to people who aren't even enrolled in your course sections. In addition to making sure that stuff is accessible, keeping it off of Blackboard means that you know whether or not it's linkable. So if you want to send people direct links to something and say, we're having class orientation on such and such a day, you can put that link into an email message. You can post it almost anywhere and know that it's actually going to come up. And then the side benefit. If you've actually put together even a rough outline page that links all this together, and you hide a link to that from your own homepage or something that's being crawled by Google and all the search engines, suddenly all your course materials become searchable because Google has crawled them for you. And so if you wanted to find out, for example, what I've said in CS 250 this semester about arrays, it may not be obvious, but every one of those links coming up is a link to my course. How? Well, I added on a requirement that this be taken from the site secweb.cs.odu.edu, which is our server, and that it have CS250 in the URL. But that's all I did with that little box. That's simple enough. You can tell students to just put that at the end of their own searches, have it for them to copy and paste, and suddenly all your material is searchable. And believe me, come exam time, they will love you for that. Also want to talk about another form of communication with students, which is office hours. One of the things you quickly learn when you start dealing with distance students in any format, they're going to need some flexibility on those office hours. You can't have all your office hours in a band across the morning and expect that you'll be accessible to many of these students. So you need to spread them around. And at least in my field, I need to not only be able to talk to these people during office hours, I need them to be able to show me what they're working on so that we can have a dialogue and we can point to stuff and say, I think you may need to tweak this little thing right here. Well, there's lots of modes then that are available. We can do things with Skype and some screen sharing there. We have our Adobe Connect server here at ODU, which lets you share documents back and forth during a live session. And of course, there's always the good old-fashioned telephone and things like that as ways of meeting. So you kind of get used to working with distance students and saying, okay, I've got various options available for you. And then what happens? All the local students go, wow, this is cool. I don't actually have to drive into campus in order to talk to the professor during office hours. Or sometimes I don't even have to cross the campus to talk with the professor during office hours, and I can get my answers. So they sort of appreciate that. And if you've started distributing your times around, well, they're going to love that too, because if you just have that one band of times across the morning, some of them have class then, and so they're going to appreciate it. And then, of course, another nice thing is you can actually do some office hours from home if you've got all these connection things available. However, think about your office hours. See if they compare to my experience. Last block of office hours before an assignment is due, everybody wants to talk to you. The other office hour blocks during the preceding 2 weeks, you could be located out in the Gobi Desert for all the traffic you're going to see at your office door. And that's kind of, it's bad enough when you're sitting in your office going, well, do I dare get involved in something time-consuming that I don't want to be interrupted in, or is somebody actually going to walk in the door? But then when you're at home and you're relying on things like Adobe Connect, now you've not only got to be there, but you've got to have your eye on that screen, because I guarantee you 1 out of 4 students who show up will forget to turn their microphone on, realize that you can't hear them talking, and they'll start typing in the chat window. And if you've covered that up with something else that you're actually working on, they're going to get very, very frustrated at that point. So the solution, I think, is have them sign up for these slots. And sign up not only tell you when they're coming in, but which of these various connection modes they want to use. You can go very simple, create a wiki for your course, and in the wiki put sign-up sheets. And since the wikis are editable by the students, not edible by the students, they might like that, but editable by the students, they can put their names in there and they can say what connection mode, whether they want to meet you directly in your office or by telephone or by Adobe Connect or something as part of that. That's a workable solution. However, it does mean you need to make copies of these sheets every week, and it tends to segregate your office hours by course, because if you don't have separate blocks of time for each course, since only the students in that course will see that particular wiki, that doesn't work very well. But we actually have another possibility. Just as of this fall, when ITS rolled out the Google Apps for faculty, which is you can create a Google Calendar and make it public just for office hours. And this is showing a bit more. Let's go to next week, actually. And your students come in, they will see these little buttons. And they can click on a button during a time slot and book an appointment. And in my description for what's going on during that time, I say choose one of these. And noticeably missing from that particular block, because it's an evening block, is my office. Is not an option, because I'm holding these office hours from home. And so they can contact me by phone, or by Skype, or by network, which on the previous page you explained that's Adobe Connect. And so they can just click on one of those, and it's really easy to set these up. If you go into Google Calendar through your ODU lock-in, every time you create a block of time as an event in that calendar, it'll pop up a little thing that says, do you want to divide this into appointment blocks? And if you say yes, then that's what they see when they come in. It's not perfect because our email isn't integrated with Google. We don't get the email notices when someone has selected one of them. They get email confirming that they selected one, but it doesn't come to our faculty email, unfortunately. But still, it's not a bad thing, and I've done very well with that since that rolled out in the fall. Only had one incident of a student showing up about 5 hours after the appointment he had made. Turned out he had his laptop set to Greenwich Mean Time. And you can figure the rest out from there. All right, rule number 2. This is a long journey. Plan for it. You don't create an online course, you don't create a live course and put that much work into it with the hopes of never doing this course again. At least most of us don't. There may be some of you out there who are into that sort of self-abuse, but I'm certainly not. I expect to teach these courses many, many times. And that means the course is going to change. Your course, if you wind up offering it multiple semesters, will change. The textbook may change. If you're lucky, they just issued a new edition and only invalidated half of your references to things going on in the textbook. If you're unlucky, the textbook goes out of print, you need to find a completely different one, and now you need to rewrite every reference that you had to material in the textbook. The world may change. All those clever little references to current events and cultural icons that you sprinkled into your videos or your written material, those are going to look so old after a year or two. You will just be embarrassed by some of it. Most important, you will change. I mean, if you're all like me, every time you offer a course, you're thinking, wow, I could have really made that clearer if I had said or done this instead. And so you think of things that you really want to change in this course. So you're not going to just put your online course or your slides for your live courses in the can and be done with them. You're going to want to make changes. And of course, there's nothing like having students go through your course with you and start asking you questions to reveal the stuff that you thought was crystal clear. And in fact, well, maybe not. So we're all happy when we bring out a new course, live with all of our slides, online or whatever. We think we produce these wonderful works of art, things of beauty. And it's great to take pride in the materials you put out there. But I almost guarantee you that 1 or 2 semesters later, you're going to look at the same thing and envision it more like that. You're going to go, wow, look at the holes. It's still functional. It still gets the students to where they need to go, but there's a lot of opportunities for missteps along the way. So you can't view your courses as static. And that rubs against the model that we often have, particularly for developing online courses, where we make this really intense effort to create the course, with lots and lots of support being given to the faculty member at that time, and then it's sort of, okay, bye, we're done with you. You need to make the modifications yourself. So you need to think about that. And getting back to my earlier, I'm mixing metaphors here, so let's get away from architecture and back to the journey. What do you pack for your journey? What do you put into particularly your online courses? And the first thing I would offer up is the observation, you've heard of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, I will tell you, if you can't fix it, it's already broken. If somebody tells you when you're developing your online course, or anytime you're developing course materials, look, this is really clever and it's really shiny and students are going to love it, and they say, let's put in animations and let's put in this, and if you can't come along later and fix it yourself when it's dated or no longer applicable to your course material and so forth, you should probably find a simpler way to do it in the first place. And make sure, or demand that that person, that wizard who is pushing that particular technology at you, demand that they show you how to fix it when it's broken later, which is even better. And it actually ties into my second observation, which is, if you view this as a process where you're not just developing the course once, but you're modifying it over a long period of time, then you have time to recoup an investment of your own effort in learning new technology. And it becomes a question of figuring out which technologies will pay off for you as those time-saving, effort-saving levers in the long run. And here I'm going to offer a couple of case studies. As I say, I bounce between courses all the time, live, online, mixtures in between. And consequently, I've got a lot of things that talk about a certain subject. And I want to have that discussion go on in different formats. So for my live course, I've got slides. And we all know what the typical slide looks like. For the folks to print out, I don't want them killing enough trees to print out all the slides, so I'll do an 8.5 by 11 format for them. And then for the web people, I'll have something which is a little bit easier on the eye for reading on a screen. Thing is, I do not want to actually write 3 different documents for that. And the other factor is, looking between here, those introductory paragraphs, next we turn our attention to and so forth, none of that's in the slides. That's the stuff I say, more or less, when I'm standing up there lecturing with the slides. So, in essence, my slides, these bulleted lists that make up typical slides, or the examples that make up typical slides, they become sort of detailed bulleted lists within my larger documents for the web version of the course, or even for the printable version for the students to take away and print in the live version of the course. But I don't want to do 2, 3, 4 different documents all talking about the same material. And that brings me into a place where I sort of have to wax a little bit philosophical about document presentation. I will tell you establish my credentials here. Back when I did my PhD dissertation at The Ohio State University, which is not exactly a technological backwater, I did the first word-processed PhD dissertation there. And I had to write my own word processor to do it. Probably spent as much time on that as actually writing the text in my dissertation. Most of the document production world has been taken over by the WYSIWYG philosophy. What you see is what you get. Type it out, click on the little buttons, get exactly what you want this thing to look like. Right? So you read a typical paper, and what happens? You come across a section that's in italics. Why is this in italics? Because they're defining a new term appearing for the first time in the course. Then you read a little bit more, and there's something else in italics. Why is this italics? Because they're citing someone else's paper, and they've put the title in italics. Come read a little bit later, you see something else in italics. Why is that in italics? Because it's a block quotation from someone. Somebody's focused entirely on, page by page, how do I want this thing to look? There is an alternative, which is called markup languages, which suggests that maybe what you see is what you get might not be what you want all the time. And markup languages, instead of saying, I want this italic, I want this italic, I want that italic, I say, this is a newly defined term. This is a title. This is a block quotation. And then later you say, my style for producing the 8.5 by 11 document is I want these things italic, those things underlined, and so on. So it's a different philosophy of how you produce documents. There are lots of markup languages. Some of them are incredibly finicky. Some of them are specialized. If we have any other STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics folks here, many of them will recognize LaTeX as being very well regarded for its ability to do mathematics type setting. But even something as simple as HTML with modern CSS, you can change things around. Same HTML file, change one line, and I've got slides. Now, it's not the best slides. I have to scroll, and I'm not entirely sure why, but at some point the world decided that scrolling is evil during presentations. Although if you've ever tried to break apart a mathematical proof, or in my case a program, into page-size blocks, you have reason to challenge that particular assumption, I think. But if you really don't like that, another one-line change get you that. So in each of those cases, what I've done is I've marked things saying this is a program listing, this is emphasized text, and so forth. And then I changed the style when I actually want to produce a particular version for a particular approach. The other thing which you get with these is the ability to label some text as conditional. And remember I said I've got these paragraphs that don't show up in the slides, but they do show up in the version for the web and the printable version. Most of these markup languages will let you mark text to say this should only appear in the following kinds of output, in the following kinds of presentation versions, and leave them out of things like slides and things like that. And I think that's really a big time saver. In fact, I don't understand why this hasn't been integrated into most of the WYSIWYG tools, although LibreOffice and OpenOffice are making a stab at finally bringing conditional text in. Because Murphy's Law of document management, if you have two separate documents describing the same subject matter, one will always be out of date. I don't know about you, if I've got two separate documents describing the same thing and I think of a way to make one better, I'll always put off updating the second document along the same lines. And so they're never consistent after that. So I think for a lot of people who are getting into this long-term scheme of I need to prepare course documents, I need to maintain them and be able to support them over long periods of time, looking for something that at least supports conditional text is likely to be a big payoff for you. So that's sort of a case study. And I just sort of want to end up, I think, with a reflection that if the purpose of good technology is to provide levers for us, it's still incumbent upon us to make sure that we're using the lever to solve the correct problem. Mark Twain, "Give me whereon to stand, said Archimedes, and I will move the earth." But suppose he had moved the earth, what then? What benefit would it have been to anybody? You do have to choose the right problem to tackle. But what I would encourage you to do, to go back to my earlier point, think of where you spend your time and effort the second time you offer every course. And those are the places where I think if you put an investment into looking at your alternatives and maybe learning what some of the alternatives are, you stand a chance of actually, doing something for yourself. And doing something for yourself means you'll have more time to actually do something for your students as well. Any questions, comments, objections?
I'm not entirely sure how you handle accessibility for people, say, with hearing impairments. You've written out what you're going to say. Is that what you do? You actually expose that to the students as you present it online, for example? Or?
As a matter of fact, I do exactly that. There's the online version of my documents. I usually start from my slides and try to interpolate between the slides what I tend to say about them when I'm lecturing. And that becomes for the pure text version, I have some recorded video and things like that as well. But for the pure text version, that becomes what I generate the online course. And then once I've got it, well, there's no reason to not put that up as the printable version of the slides for the live courses as well. And that works for accessibility reasons too.
I'm Gianluca De Leo. I'm actually one of those people who wrote this dissertation in LaTeX. So I know about software development and stuff. But I was wondering if you have any suggestion for those faculty at ODU that I believe are the majority who do not have access to their own web server. That's what you show us. And also they don't know anything about coding. So even the HTML page that you show us, that probably, I would suppose, the majority of the people would not know how to do it.
Well, ITS will give you an area in which you can put your own web content. And so I think faculty here at ODU, everyone should have access to an area where they can post their own web content. There is, although I've sort of badmouthed Blackboard a little bit in terms of not being able to link to stuff and things like that, I will say there is one workaround for that, which is your content area in Blackboard, not your course content area, but the content area. You can upload an entire website to that, basically. And that is one of the places that Blackboard gives you that does give you stable URLs, stable web addresses, so that you could actually link to it and give links to people and have them find it.
Sorry, I'm very interested in this. Are you sure that ITS will give me a space on a server? Because apparently you are not using the ITS server, you are using a server in your department. So, and I did try in the past, I've seen that it's not possible. And even if you have a page, you have to respect the color of ODU, all of these things. So I'm not sure that this is a true statement. And I will investigate because I'm actually interested in trying to do it.
Okay. Hey, I'm willing to be subversive too, so if you find out that it's not possible, we've got the provost in here. Maybe I've convinced her that this is a good thing,
Yeah, and I just come from a meeting with the IT security folks, so I know part of the problem, of course, is that is to maintain the integrity and security, and I know particularly in computer sciences where you've got students who are programming, if you're just letting loose on our regular servers, then there'd be could be chaos. I'm sure you teach them very well, but they could make mistakes.
Unfortunately, we teach them to create chaos as well as order. So.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. I did have a question, though, because I was curious, when you're in a little slightly different topic, you were talking about your office hours and your virtual office hours and so on. What I see now, and I hear a lot from faculty, is that the students are emailing or texting if the professor's using texting as a communication, but at all hours of the day and night. So for a large class, say somebody has 100 students in it, they're just streaming in. So how to organize that into time blocks and be responsive to the students, but not have them expect you to respond at 3 a.m. necessarily when they're up.
For offline communications, to start with, I generally make a pledge to students that if they send an email with the approved format or post in the forum, that I will answer them within 24 hours on a weekday, 48 hours tops over the weekend. And I'm usually much better than that on average. And the ones who post, at 3 a.m. know better than to expect very fast things. For more synchronized communications, I do things like, yes, I give them a Skype ID at which they can call me. However, I have a separate Skype ID for ODU use from my personal one, and the one I give them is ODU, and I only activate that during office hours or times when I want them to know that I'm accessible. And so generally, and same thing with Adobe Connect, it's not going to do them any good to show up there if I don't know to be in there and have the classroom open. So by and large, that's one of the reasons why I try to manage things with the sign-up sheets and so forth, so that they know when I'm available, I know when they're trying to get in touch with me, and I know what mode they're trying to get in touch with me via.
Security is a very interesting issue. There were two things that struck me. Number one, what do you do to make sure, for instance, that you don't put anything on the World Wide Web that you shouldn't be, that possibly might be perfectly legitimate within the constraints of your electronic classroom, but may not quite be, you may not have all the permissions and whatever for the whole world. To think about that is sometimes interesting. And the second thing is that also, in terms of the email business and filters and whatever, which I use, the one thing that I'm always very nervous about is that I get an email from, misssexydiva@hotmail.com that puts the correct number there, and so I just enter a response to her, that way, and actually I'm not supposed to even admit that she's an ODU student, because that's not what we're supposed to be doing. So what do you do about those two, quote, security kinds of issues? I'm
Borderline paranoid about intellectual property issues to begin with. So things like every one of the pictures and illustrations here, they're public domain. Or, well, no, not public domain, I shouldn't say that. They're either public domain or have Creative Commons licenses that allowed me to use them. And there actually is a printable version of this which has the appropriate credits on the final page. So part of it is I try to avoid doing that. But I like to have a presence on the web with my course materials. I think it's great when an ordinary Google search on a topic starts bringing up my stuff. And free advertisement for me, free advertisement for my department, free advertisement for ODU. Great thing. I think we should probably be doing more of that. But yeah, it does require some care. And so, I try to keep everything that would actually have student identifications back in Blackboard, or we do have a secure server, and so I can put some stuff there. But frankly, I try to keep most of that on Blackboard. So I acknowledge your first problem, and I guess I would just say I'm paranoid about it, and that serves me well. The second issue in terms of email, if I'm not certain about an email communication, frankly, I just don't answer it. I mean, I have in every course a how to ask questions document. Right after the syllabus, there is how to navigate my website, and then there is how to ask questions. And one of the guidelines that I give them in my how to ask questions document is make sure I know who you are. If I get, and it's not just for the reason you cite, if I get email from partyanimal@aol.com saying, how come I lost points on this week's assignment? What course are we talking about? I don't know who this is. Which assignment? I'm teaching more than one. They always, students never remember that we do that. So, I tell them up front that, the best they're going to get from that is a response saying, well, who are you? What course are you asking about?
Currently, we are trying to develop the global health certification program, but our target population students will be out of the United States also. And do you have specific suggestion related with technology? You know, is not everybody has the same technology in their country.
I tend to go for lowest common denominator stuff as much as I can. And that's a pretty broad thing to say, as much as I can. I drove Allison crazy because I don't even use PowerPoint. This is an ordinary PDF file because almost everyone can read PDFs. Math has a real problem because the standards for representing math in web documents are all over the place at the moment, after looking like they were converging very nicely there for about 5 years. But that's a real problem, both with language content that you're taking, the fact that all the tools that they're going to work with, like if you're going to have them working in Blackboard with discussion groups and things like that, they're going to be used to a broad, possibly even a different alphabet to type with. And so you've got to, have support for, international alphabets and things like that for the student. And that's a hard problem. And no, I haven't had to deal with that too much, so. Anything else? Okay, well, I want to end up with an invitation, though, which is the CLT folks have this wonderful site, the Online Faculty Learning Community, and I recommend that anyone interested in these topics go there. Even if you're not sure you're teaching an online course, but you're just interested in the tech side, technology support side of teaching, go ahead, go there. I've actually, in the forum, I've created a thread called Leveraging Technology, and I invite anyone who wants to do a follow-up to this, or anyone who's seeing it in the televised version and wants to do a follow-up sometime soon. I won't guarantee I'll do this for years, but to join me there or offer up your own suggestions on what you might want to do. Thank you.